Welcome to Black Ink Cinema podcast, the directing duo, Brewster and Michèle Stephenson. You have been shortlisted at this year's Oscars for the Uplifting Black Voices through documentary. I want to know everything, especially about the documentaries that have been shortlisted and a brief summary of each documentary.
Well, Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni Project, is a film that profiles the life and work of the Black arts movement poet, Nikki Giovanni, who is still with us today and has been very prolific over the last few decades, but is a very special type of documentary because we take a very non traditional approach. It is what we like to call a time travel through space and Earth through the mind of this seminal poet, Nikki Giovanni.
Well, Black Girls Play, there are some similarities, but it's a short documentary which examines the important contribution of games. In this case, the games that are played by Black girls worldwide, uh, and how they contributed to almost every form of popular American culture, from jazz to gospel to rock to R&B. And that's a very exciting discovery. And I say the words discovery intentionally because their important contribution has been erased.
Yes.
And that is part of what we do at Rada Studio is prevent the erasure of these contributions, which,
Mhm.
from our point of view, allows for greater agency uh, of women and Black women specifically.
And we try to
Definitely.
do that. It's not just excavating the erased or the unseen, but using it in a way that challenges the form.
Mm,
So I think both
def-
films, in their approach, um, um, have a very special storytelling sort of structure and device, the
mhm,
way we use visuals, music, editing, and sound.
So our process is to unearth information historically, to uplift
mhm,
character, to not shy away from difficult subject matter, but
mhm.
also to entertain. And the interesting thing about both films, people leave with a smile on their face and thinking, "Wow," uh, and that's an accomplishment.
I'm absolutely guilty of that because after watching both of them, first of all, the knowledge and information I took from Black Girls Play, I was like, I didn't know that, I didn't know this, and I'm like, this needs to be taught in schools. This is like information that we all need to know. I don't understand how I've lived as long as I have without knowing how imperative um, a childhood game that I used to play has affected the world, essentially. And since we're talking about Black Girls Play, the story of hand games, where can people watch it just before we get into dissecting the movie?
Well, currently it's available on ESPN Plus, which is a subscription platform. But I
Mhm,
do think that the people at ESPN 30 for 30 and ESPN Films, this is
mhm,
under their umbrella, are really
mhm,
looking to see and work very rigorously on community engagement and outreach approaches where we could make this accessible
mhm,
to a much wider audience. You know, the film is about Black girls play in a sport on a sports channel where, the vast majority of the audience are, male loving sports loving men. But again, I think the approach with the leadership at ESPN Films, they understand the potential of the film. So I think that another way to stay up to date to
mhm,
on where the film is will be screening or what is happening with the film is to go to our website as well,
mhm.
radastudio.com. .org, and we have a newsletter that comes out that keeps people informed on where our work is being shown.
I
Amazing.
say kudos to ESPN for attempting to expand their audience, but also expand the notion of what is sport and
Mm,
who gets to participate,
mhm,
uh, and going into a more granular meaning of the importance of sport. You know, one of the first things we learned was that games are so important in terms of the development of children. They teach
mm,
people how to socialize, and there are studies that show that the creativity of a nation is determined by the games that we play,
mm,
and that's essential element of our ability to grow and prosper.
mhm. I loved what I love seeing is the innocence of little black girls in this documentary. As we don't get to see it often in the mainstream, I feel anyway, just like having fun, enjoying themselves, and being little girls. I feel like we're often aged as black girls. So was that something that you wanted to highlight?
Well, it's something we always highlight. But the point is that they are innocent and they are having fun, despite any other uh, the myriad of obstacles that they have to face because of
Mm,
race and gender. So
mm,
we don't see it in the movies. Why
right.
not? And so what we like to say is it's easy for us to show it. It's easy for us to inspire people because they don't show it. It's like
It's what we
um,
live. We live through it. In some ways, it well, there's of course an intentionality, but it's also it's what we've experienced. As people
Mm,
of the Black diaspora. I'm originally from the Caribbean, from Haiti, and so it was just about the very natural sort of obvious for us, right? Uh,
yeah.
um, Representation and connection that we wanted to
Mm,
show. I think
yeah.
it's really the stereotype or the aging, as you've mentioned,
Mm,
that because it comes from a lens at times that doesn't know us, right? That doesn't know our communities, that
mm,
falls into the traps. So yes, there was an intentionality, but intentionality was really about representing what we have grown up with, or we have lived with on a day-to-day basis with our
mm,
cousins, our aunts,
mhm,
our uncles,
well,
yeah.
without this getting too intellectual, but let me just say this: uh, the reason uh, it's surprising uh, is because the stereotypes which exist, and that's why I talk about uh, archiving and unearthing history. So when you are going against stereotype, uh, it's a shocker for people, but it shouldn't be. And so one of these days, the stereotypes will be gone. Probably not in my lifetime.
Think all the fingers crossed. I hope so. I really enjoyed it. What inspired you to tell this story? Because I know unearthing archives and finding our truth and sharing our truth. But what inspired you? Was there a particular moment, experience?
It was really through our conversations with ESPN. We had spent actually a couple of years trying to find the right story that we wanted to
Right.
tell with them.
Hmm.
And they actually approached us with this article and the book that Kira Gaunt, who is a main participant in the film, wrote. She's an ethnomusicologist, a Black woman
Right.
from Maryland, who all of her work is dedicated to
Mm,
unearthing these connections as an ethnomusicologist. And we
mm,
were just completely blown away by the book, by the story. And it was a big discovery for us. And so
mm.
we were very excited to then, sink our teeth into it.
Definitely. I love the correlation made between history and the use of music in communication. Like that's something
Mm,
that I think, I don't know, I just take for granted and it's just something that I'm used to seeing every day and it's something that I grew up in, whether it be at home or at school. So it was really nice to feel even part of a bigger community as
mhm.
well.
Well, the important part is that communication doesn't have to be verbal,
Mm,
and that embodied communication is quite powerful
mm,
and effective at transmitting emotion,
mm,
transmitting hope,
mm,
transmitting what's safe and what's unsafe, and so
mm.
that um, it's not always written in a book.
Right. And in
Yes.
this case, it's even more significant. It's transmitting culture, you know,
Yeah.
culture beyond, in spite of, in spite
Mm,
of um, the violence and oppression and the attempt to take
mm,
away, to remove culture, right?
mm, mm,
So it became this safe vessel that you
mhm.
cannot really take away
Yeah.
from generation to generation.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's our superpower to kind of, in spite of everything, we still rise above it. We're still able to have joy. We're still able to love one another and do all these things and create, constantly
Mhm.
creating. Um,
So when we're in screenings, what we found is that the audience uh, uh, began to recite the rhymes,
Mhm.
and
mm,
uh, and for the audience that doesn't know the film, uh, these are rhymes that are pretty ubiquitous. They may have started in one community, but they're worldwide.
mhm,
uh, and to see how um, a rhyme like Miss Mary Mac, right, impacts people
mm,
and is as moved around the world is pretty amazing. So whoever's in the audience, they're moving and they're smiling and they're repeating the words. You know, uh, but what some of the ways in which this film inspires folks is the you can see in Going to Mars, the Nikki
mhm.
Giovanni Project,
Yeah.
which is really about words and sound and rhythm as well, but
Mhm.
using poetry, which is kind of
Yeah.
similar, don't you think, uh,
Absolutely.
to the
Mhm.
rhymes of
Definitely.
children?
And both of those had a lovely theme through it, of just creating art and art that has influenced the world as well. I was completely unaware of a lot of the popular music that had copied a lot of a lot of these hand game songs, and the classic Nas Uchiwali, which during high school, secondary school, that was my jam. I didn't know that was based on a Jamaican game song. So it's things like that that I'm not. When I was speaking to you, Michelle, earlier, like this needs to be in schools. This I don't know if the next step is to approach schools to tell more of a wider music history because it's affecting popular culture. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, it's affecting popular culture, but also it's that Black women's and Black young girls' contribution to it is being
Mhm.
erased. In this
Yeah.
case, hip hop being, you know, predominantly a male space where it has historically been difficult
Mm.
for women to really be represented in their full selves.
Yeah.
This short film is even more important when we look at it that way,
Mm.
in sort of resetting the influence and power.
Yeah. You've got some great contributors in this. What was the process in selecting them?
Well, normally we have researchers who spend a
Hmm.
fair amount of time finding subjects. We interview them
Hmm.
via Zoom, not unlike this experience. And we choose people who we think would be great on camera. That means smiling, emoting, and providing the information in a way that it's accessible. Uh, so we also wanted to
Mm.
travel. So what we did is we found in multiple areas around the country. We traveled to Tennessee,
Mm.
New York. Part of this was shot in our home, but what we did is we found an amazing um, editor located in Mexico City, who is Venezuelan and also had an experience with these rhymes in Venezuela. And she discovered connections that
Mm.
even were more international. There are there's footage from the
Mm.
Dominican Republic, from Liberia, from East Africa,
Mm.
and I believe Brazil, uh, and so that we could, demonstrate the power and the reach of
Mm.
this work.
I
Yeah.
think also in terms of, we wanted to be very intentional about it being sort of intergenerational in terms of the
Mm.
contributions of the people we interviewed, it
Yeah.
being centered around women's voices. We knew that Kira Gaunt, the ethnomusicologist who wrote the book, would be at the core, right, of the structure of the piece. But Marveline Moore, who teaches music, and conducts workshops. She lives in Knoxville and Tennessee, and she was able to connect us with these young women, middle schooler and high schoolers who played in this schoolhouse that we found, that is a historical sort of a wooden, one room schoolhouse that we used, and seeing that intergenerational play between her experiences and them actually playing through the programs that they're involved in. And then later we have the intergenerational discussions with Elena Pinderhughes, who is a very who is basically a genius flutist, jazz
Mm.
musician, who can trace
Sounded
back to her
beautiful.
training. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Jamila Woods, who's able
Mm.
to sort of center what it meant to belong for her, how hand games
Mhm.
actually were devised for her to belong to her community,
Yeah.
where in some cases she was isolated,
Mm.
and how she turned the work into a political statement also,
Mm.
with
Mm.
one of the rhymes. So
Yeah.
those were
So,
also very sort of intentional. So we had these contributions from women of different ages who
yeah.
who are experts in their field.
I
Absolutely.
think one of the things that we try to avoid is experts, uh, is specifically male experts. We search
Mm.
for them, and luckily, they weren't available, or they didn't shine like the women who were
Mm.
involved in the games.
Mm.
And kudos to my wife for recognizing that and putting me back on track.
Love that. But how do you think we can restore the power balance? Because as we've seen, women are very instrumental and influential in hip hop, in music, but it's pretty much a man's game.
Well, I do think, I don't know how, I don't have the full solution, but I do know that what we are doing in terms of shining a light through narrative and through story has a
Mm.
very powerful impact. For me,
Mhm.
storytelling is healing.
Absolutely.
It's validating,
Mm.
and I think the more people we can reach with a story like Black Girls Play, the more young girls we can affect, who can hopefully maybe you know
Mm.
um, feel not just validated, but uh, work through life, or walk through life with a sense of self that can,
Mm.
impact the rest of the people that they are in touch with, as well as themselves. So it's first to
Well,
think about
Mm.
healing through the stories.
Mm.
You know,
well,
Yeah.
one thing is clear. Uh, Millions of people will see this film because of
Mhm.
ESPN. I've been in the audience, and I've seen little girls spark and say, and smile and say, wow, I did that. My mom did
Mm,
that. My grandma did that. So when you have that
mm,
kind of information, you have that understanding, um, you can say, step aside. I have something of value. So
yeah.
all we're providing is the history, and we're
Mm.
feeding to you uh, this pill of history uh, in a custard. It's called our
In a
filmmaking process.
in a yummy custard. Do you guys have, any favorite hand games yourself or
I don't
rhymes?
know really. I mean, I think I played the most. It was probably Miss Mary Mac. I'm the most sort of uh, used to. It's the easiest one. So yeah.
I just wanted to point out that that I grew up next door, meaning the guys would be playing while the girls would be playing playing basketball or football, where the girls were, uh,
Mm,
a few feet away doing hand games. It was
mm,
something that I didn't have the expertise in,
mm,
and I was intimidated by the amount of athleticism associated with these
mm,
games. And
mm.
so I just appreciate it now. And I wish I had taken more advantage of it. I'd probably be, a better filmmaker.
No, you're great. You're great. We were talking about the mainstream, and I know Black TikTokers are constantly being robbed of their trends, but I hadn't made the connection with with it being the new hand game, which I just thought like completely blew my mind. And now I can't unsee it. So, and I'm terrible as well. So I leave that to my nieces. Um, who made that correlation? Because I just think it was fantastic.
It was part of our research process, really, in
Mm,
conversations with, many people, including Kira Gaunt. But I think in some ways, Elena sort of brought it home. But we were looking
mm,
at where are Black girls innovating today, right? That
mm,
technology is in some ways is a vessel, right? Is a vessel
mm.
in this case for creativity, and we know that wherever we're innovating, because we're constantly innovating, there is also
Absolutely.
appropriation. And how
Yeah.
does that appropriation take place? And we
Mhm.
know that there have been battles in the TikTok space around
Yeah.
innovations that Black girls have done, and then others have taken credit for or have gotten remuneration for. So we wanted to
Mm,
include
mm.
that as this continuum, as this next level.
Yeah. No.
I don't think that appropriation of is ever going to end. And and so I have another way of looking at it. Like if you look at the 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 important pillars of these games, or the important pillars of what they call Afro-Atlantic, wherever we landed and wherever we came from,
Mm,
culture. So there is a call for innovation and
mm,
creativity in the middle of the circle. You've seen it in
mm,
jazz and hip hop,
mm,
and but but the thing is, we are welcoming other cultures to enter
mm,
the circle,
mm,
and then we have to go back in the circle and innovate again. It is an
mm,
opportunity for more innovation, for better
mm,
music, for better oratory, for
mm,
better athletics,
mm,
for growth. But at the end of the day, we want to give credit where credit is due.
Mhm.
mm.
But
Absolutely.
in economics, that's another conversation. That's a deeper conversation.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
benefits economically?
Mhm.
Mm,
Mhm.
absolutely.
What we find is, and you can see it sort of in certain cases in hip hop, right? So, the hand games influence the hip hop appropriates, but then capitalism happens, involves, and then there's a commodification of the form, and then a stagnation in some cases of the innovation, and then new innovation happens on the underground that then gets influenced again, and you see it
Yeah.
over and over and over again. We will constantly innovate. I mean, that's part of,
Mm,
you know, what our humanity tells us to do in these
mm,
circumstances. And so
mm.
um, it's important to be able to honor that innovation and center it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to keep having the strength to keep going in and reinventing oneself and coming back with something
Mhm.
new, setting new trends. You know, what is one thing you would want people to take away after watching Black Girls Play the story of hand games?
I think when I watch the film, it's not what other people think. I think of my mom and and how
Mm,
important she was in my life. Like when I was in church and she was beating that tambourine and it was polyrhythmic, and I was trying so hard to understand that those rhythms. Those are the rhythms of my life, and you'll see it in our editing. You'll see it in so many ways, in the way we speak, uh, and I'm grateful that I saw that,
yeah,
but I didn't appreciate it at the time.
that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Honestly, I'm very sure when everyone gets a chance to see it, they're going to feel exactly how I did because it is a beautiful piece of art. And then moving on to your other documentary, um, Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni Project, who is an incredible, influential poet.
I mean, going to Mars, we like to call it this time travel through space and Earth, use through, a snippet of the mind of the genius mind of Nikki Giovanni, and through her
Mm,
poetry.
mhm,
So we get an expansive sort of experience, an expansive experience of the impact of her work,
mm,
both on a very personal and intimate level, as
mhm,
well as very, very powerful statements of historical, at
mm,
sometimes violent moments that our communities have been through. We like to call it the anti-biopic biopic because we use unconventional forms of telling the story. This is
mm,
not a typical profile piece. It is a piece that is intentionally told exclusively and uniquely through Nikki Giovanni's voice. There are no interviews or outside experts talking to us about her. This is her in her own voice, of course,
mm,
with our vision as directors in terms of what for us resonated as important, and where we wanted to push
mm.
the envelope from a narrative perspective, but through the engagement of her words and her performances.
So what Nikki Giovanni um, uh, wants is to go to Mars, and
Yeah.
she has wanted that. She has had that goal since she was 12 years old,
Mm,
and one of the things that she says is that Black women, um, based on their experience now and in history with
mm,
the transatlantic slave trade, are uniquely positioned for that journey.
mm,
And she spends an hour and a half in this film convincing us that Mars is the place. Uh, and we have to come to terms with her argument, but more importantly, our audience is encouraged to think of what Mars really means for them. And I
mm,
found myself in tears during the first rough cut because that realization was powerful. Takes me back to my mom, right? But for Nikki, it's grandma, and so she's able to take this complex thought and translate it into relationships, and that's how we make this
mm.
quasi experimental biopic into something that's really relatable to everyone.
Mm.
What is your goal in life? How do you achieve that? And you see that through the many phases of Nikki's life and how that turns out for her over 80 years.
Mm.
I, I, I'm reluctant to tell you more because there would be
Giving it
too
away.
many spoiler
Yeah.
alerts. But what I can say is that people have come to the theater saying I thought this was a movie on space, uh, but I realized it was a movie about me. We watched
Mm.
audiences lean in, but more importantly, this is a poet speaking, and poets usually take truth and give it to you in ways that you've
Mm.
never seen it.
Mm.
Um, I think one scene that does that for me is when she discusses Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer,
Oh,
and she gives
fantastic
us a
analogy.
perspective, and she gives us perspective on the relationship uh, between Mr. Claus and Rudolph. This illuminating.
Just dropped something. Yeah, no, honestly, I thought it was a very earnest, honest, self discovery documentary. And I felt like, as the audience, we were going on a journey with her. And usually, I think sometimes documentaries try to portray a certain image or portray themselves in a certain way, but it was just felt so relatable because she was just 100% herself. And I felt inspired even more so. I was like, right, I've got to speak my mind more. I've got to do this, got to carve out time for myself. And just things like, her putting herself first, and putting her health first. And I just feel like, again, as women as well, it's probably something that oh, it's fine. I can still do it. I can march on. Um, and just before I forget, where can people watch?
Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni Project, is available currently on
Mm,
the platform Max. It is an
okay.
HBO documentary films original film, and
Hmm.
those of you who again have subscription to Max, you can reach it. You can see it there. We just recently launched on the platform, so we're very
Mm,
excited to draw people to it.
yeah, I'm sure you will. I think also another thing that I resonated with was how she was able to articulate how you see things as a child versus how you see how they actually are. So when she describes as um, we were poor but I didn't feel it, or and stuff like that, I you just have this like, things are great. You're just with your siblings, you're having a great time, you're playing out, playing hand games, whatever it might be. Um, and all the adult stuff, uh, you don't really know or think about or see. But I just thought she was really was able to articulate that. How long did it take to film the documentary?
The film was a 7 years in the making, a labor of love.
Wow,
That
wow.
these were, obstacles that we encountered along the way, but turned them into opportunity for us.
Mm,
The privilege of being able to spend 7 years with Nikki Giovanni and
yeah.
document some, parts of her life over those years really provided a number of beautiful gems for us
Mm,
to include in the film. But
mm,
also, it allowed us to really explore layers of creativity
mm,
that I think if we were on a short time frame, we might
mm.
not have reached
Yeah,
as easily,
yeah.
if at all, because there's a lot of layering in the film where we intentionally avoid literal exposition. And it's
Mm,
about the archival being in conversation with the narration, with the
mm,
poetry,
mm.
and um, with the sound and the music.
It takes you on a journey. It definitely takes you on a journey, which I appreciate. In the doc, Nikki's asked about the role of her friends or friends. What has the role of friends played in your life, Joe, Michelle?
Uh, I think friends. We're a communal society, and Nikki tries to say that she is not friendly, but she's
Yeah.
very social, and she loves a crowd. She lives in a community where everyone knows her name. And I think friends are a superpower. And without friends and family, it is hard to survive. And
Absolutely.
and it's more than survive. It's to thrive and to have joy. And so that's what friends mean to me.
Mm,
That's
absolutely.
why I live in the community I live in. And I think we all do the same.
Michelle, do you want to add anything? Are you?
No, I mean, that's what fuels us, right? This
Mhm,
idea that the healing in this storytelling process is not just individual, it is collective as well. Whether
mm,
it's the people who we work with and how we engage with the material, whether it's,
mm,
the friendships that we develop with Nikki and her spouse, Ginny, along the way. We know that those things are, in some ways, for life, right?
mm,
And I think we try to emphasize that in the film. I think that's part of our vision and our priority that may or may not be Nikki's, but that she definitely exudes. Whether I'll reveal sort of a little bit the Afro punk scene for
mm,
those who know that festival and her performance there, show a community coming together that is intergenerational, but is also sharing a lived experience that is healing and self-reinforcing, and accepting. So
mm.
that's what centers us in our process. Is part of why we do what we do.
Amazing. I've always wanted to go to Afropunk. It looks like an amazing festival. Nikki Giovanni is extraordinarily inspiring, but what inspired you to tell the story?
Well, we were coming out of a 13-year exclusively observational film that we had done that actually turned the camera on ourselves and our son. Joe and I are life partners and creative partners.
Mhm,
And the film is called American Promise. It
mhm,
premiered also at Sundance and won a jury prize there. Um, but we wanted to flex our creative muscles after doing a film that was largely, longitudinal but observational in nature. And
mm,
we're toying with the idea of doing a profile film. And we heard Nikki on the radio in an interview while we were figuring out what our next step was going to be. And
mm,
we were, again, sort of triggered by the memories of her, the impact of her poetry on us. And decided we wanted to sort of take the leap and reach out to her and
mhm,
see if she would be willing for us to work with her on a film about her work.
So one of the things that we like to do, I'm a physician and Michelle's an attorney, and we changed professions because we
mhm,
love art,
mm,
and we thought art is political, and we're political too. Uh, but as artists, we like to play with multiple colors and
mm,
multiple tools. So we've done VR, we've done AR, we've done augmented reality, we've done short form animation, and so we wanted to work and do something that was creatively different. So we decided this was going to be a combination of telling her story was going to be a combination of "I'm Not Your Negro" meets Kurt Cobain, and so we spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out how to do that using multiple planes of storytelling. And so we use the archival plane, We use an interview, another variation of archival, the interview between James Baldwin and Nikki that occurred in London in 1971.
Love that interview. Yeah.
We also use her performance. You know, she's
Mm,
quite the performer,
mm,
comedic stand-up performer, and then we use her
mm,
poetry, and we have each
mm,
one of those levels talk to each other, uh, as opposed to having one level and having the archival, for example, just repeat what's just been said,
mm,
so that uh, it's more compelling, it's more complex, and sometimes, and I mean by complex, some one level, instead of just repeating what she says, may say the opposite, may
mm,
pose an opposite question. And so it was fun for us, and I think we've discovered a way of telling these stories, the documentary form. I said discovered. I mean, we've rediscovered that is less commercial and more entertaining.
mm. Well, I just want to say thank you, both of you, so much for sharing your time with us, discussing these two amazing documentaries, Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni Project, and Black Girls Play, the story of hand games. I'm sure everyone will go and enjoy them as well. But I just want to wish you guys the best of luck. And thank you so much for coming on Black Ink Cinema podcast.
Thank you, Rachel, for having us.
Thank you
No,
very much. It was a pleasure.